We are powering through and we're getting a lot of stuff done. Next up is lesson 18, the basics on DOM, $sign, and selector. So let's get started.
Welcome to the
Oh, hey Cameron, it's been a long time.
To be able to take you through a quick tour of the jQuery library. Over 60% of the top 100,000 most visited websites take advantage of jQuery's simple syntax and powerful DOM manipulation methods. In this course, you'll experience firsthand why jQuery is so popular as you explore the features that it has to offer. You'll start by breaking down how the jQuery library is built with JavaScript and what that means for your code. Then you'll dive into jQuery selectors and DOM navigation methods. This is probably the trickiest and most important part of learning jQuery. But once you've mastered selectors, you'll be parsing the jQuery documentation to write simple and straightforward DOM manipulation code. There are a lot of quizzes in this course, so you'll have plenty of practice manipulating the DOM with jQuery as you go. Are you ready to get started?
Yeah, all right.
You're looking at the jQuery library. This is the entire library. Notice that it's actually just JavaScript. Let me repeat that. jQuery is just a JavaScript library. It's not a language on its own, nor is it fundamentally different than the thousands of other JavaScript libraries available. There's no magic in here that you couldn't devise yourself. If you had a week or so, I'd be willing to bet that you could recreate a lot of jQuery's functionality. Look at this method, isFunction. Do you see that? Look, it's just returning true if the object passed into it has a type of function. If you recreated jQuery, your library probably wouldn't be as performant as jQuery, but you could pretty easily recreate a lot of the same methods and functionality that jQuery offers. jQuery exists largely because manipulating the DOM with vanilla JavaScript isn't always easy. For instance, inserting a new DOM node with JavaScript means creating an element, setting attributes and content of the new node, selecting the soon-to-be parent of the new node, and then finally inserting the new node as a child of the parent node. But with jQuery, all of that is simplified to one simple function. And no one wants to worry about developing websites for different browsers when all you want to do is concentrate on creating a website with a fantastic user experience. jQuery exists so that you can focus on UX, not browser quirks. But before you start writing jQuery functions, I want you to take a look under jQuery's hood.
So exciting, guys.
Like lots of websites, Udacity uses jQuery. But what is jQuery actually? What's its relationship to JavaScript? I want you to find out for yourself. Open up your browser's JavaScript console on the Udacity website. Simply type jQuery and press enter. Remember, case matters, so the Q has to be capitalized.
All right, let's do that now. Console, yeah. jQuery. Oops, jQuery. Boom. What are we looking at? All right, let's hear more from Cameron.
What shows up? Do you see a function, an object, something magical, or a non-JavaScript function?
If I were to guess, that's a function, right? Take a look at the second answer. Again, how are functions and objects related? Oh, this is, oops. What did I do? Console. Function return b.fn.init. Et. It's an object. Great job. jQuery is simply a JavaScript object.
So I've typed jQuery right here, and I'll go ahead and press enter. And there it is. It's just a function that takes in a couple parameters and returns something. Incidentally, JavaScript functions are also objects. So the correct answer here is that jQuery is a function and it's also an object. There's no magic or anything special going on. It is just JavaScript.
Okay. I'd like to know more.
With jQuery, you'll be seeing the $sign a lot. But what is the $sign? Is it some special JavaScript keyword? I'll press enter, and lo and behold, we see the exact same object that we saw before. As it turns out, the jQuery object and the $sign are mapped to the exact same thing. So what is this $sign? The $sign is a character like any other. We could even reassign it as a variable to something else if we wanted to. For instance, var $sign equals Cameron. And then when I type in the $sign and press enter, we see Cameron. With jQuery, the $sign is just a pointer to the same JavaScript object we saw before. In the spirit of making your front-end code easier to write, jQuery uses the $sign because it's faster and easier to type than the whole word jQuery. In fact, some other JavaScript libraries use the $sign as well. For instance, the MooTools library also maps the $sign to a variable.
Okay, guys. Sorry. There's a lot of some links there that I don't want to miss.
So the $sign is just a function. But now what can you do with it? jQuery returns an array-like object, which we call a jQuery collection. The reason we say it's an array-like object is that it's an object that looks and behaves like an array, but also includes some additional methods. You can pass strings into the jQuery objects, and a jQuery collection of DOM elements will be returned. On the Udacity website, for instance, I've passed $foo into the jQuery object and saw an empty array come back. All right, well, that's not too exciting. I'll come back to passing in strings like this in a moment. But what if you pass in a function? You could actually do that too. This is a pretty neat trick that I'll be revisiting at the very end of this class. You can pass a DOM element into the jQuery object as well, if you want to call some jQuery methods on it. You can call methods directly on the jQuery object, like $.ajax. $.ajax abstracts away all the annoying nuances of Ajax into a simple method call on the jQuery object. You can check out the Ajax class if you want to learn more. Notice that I'm just talking about normal JavaScript operations. It's worth repeating that jQuery is just a JavaScript library. It's not a language. The jQuery function takes in some parameters, it returns an object, and even has some methods attached to it, just like any other JavaScript object. But that's enough of me talking. It's time for you to start practicing.
All right.
The DOM is a data structure. It can best be described as a tree, much like a family tree. So I've got a sample family tree here. This family tree has parents, it has children, and it even has siblings. Elements that are nested inside each other in the DOM are children, like, for instance, this unordered list, which is a child of div. Elements at the same level are siblings, like these two list elements, or this unordered list and this form. And of course, we can go up the DOM as well. For instance, this div is the parent to that div. When writing HTML, you create a collection of nested elements that, in the end, resembles a structure much like this family tree. This HTML would map to the DOM tree you see over here. Here, the body's at the top level, and it has some divs nested underneath it. For this quiz, I want you to examine this DOM tree. Which of the following DOM elements is the immediate parent of the two list elements? You can see them in the HTML here and in the DOM tree over here. Is it the body, this div, this UL, or is it none of these?
Oh, okay. So it's got to be this one, right?
Looking at the two list elements in the DOM tree over here and in the HTML, we can see that they're nested underneath the UL, which means that the UL is their immediate parent. You can add jQuery to any website using script tags like so. You can host this file on your own server with a path like this one, but it's actually recommended to use a version of jQuery hosted on a content delivery network, or CDN. CDNs are usually much faster than your own server. Plus, it allows you to take advantage of the browser's caching feature. jQuery and Google both host jQuery. Given the sheer number of websites using jQuery, you're definitely safe using either Google or jQuery's official host to host for your production builds. And don't forget to use the minified version of jQuery in production. The minified version of jQuery is considerably smaller, so it's going to lead to faster page loads.
Cool.
jQuery makes it really easy to select specific elements in the DOM. If I wanted to select an element, like this one, for example, or maybe if I wanted to collect a collection of elements, like these two list items, I can use jQuery selectors to quickly access them. Remember how we could pass a string into the jQuery object? We call this string a jQuery selector, in that it allows us to select a part of the DOM. You can use jQuery to select a collection of DOM elements based on tag name, class name, or ID. I'll start with selectors by tag name. Passing a string of the tag name will result in a jQuery collection of all the elements of a certain tag. I'll test this by opening up my browser's JavaScript console on the Udacity website, which, as you may remember, uses jQuery. If I wanted to do something with all the divs on the screen, I could select them by passing div into the jQuery object. And there we go. We can open up the object that got returned to see a collection of DOM elements. In a moment, you'll be trying out selectors by manipulating a real website. In index.html, you'll find the site's HTML. And in app.js, you'll be writing JavaScript to modify the page. You can press the test run button to see what the page looks like. Notice how we have this comment in the app.js file. For this quiz, set the list elements variable equal to a jQuery collection of all the list elements on the page. Hit submit when you're done. Here's a quick hint. You can check your answer with the console. If you console.log the list elements variable, you can open up the browser console to see if you've selected the jQuery collection that you wanted.
Okay, guys. This is the HTML document that you'll use jQuery to modify. To take the quiz, click over to app.js. For this quiz, use a jQuery tag selector to grab all of the LIs on the page. Is it just this? Is that it? Oh, cool.
I'll start with the jQuery object, the $, and I'll pass in the string li to grab a jQuery collection of all the list elements. I'll check my answer with console.log, and I'll open up the console. You might see a lot of errors here, like we're seeing here, but don't worry, you can just pretty much ignore those. Up here, we can see the jQuery collection returned from line 5 of our program, which this is on line 5. So I will open it up, and we can see the DOM elements that we were expecting.
Interesting.
Selecting by tag is less than helpful. In fact, if you think you need to use jQuery to select all of a specific tag on a page, you might want to rethink what you're doing because there's probably a better way to accomplish what you're trying to do. Usually, we only want to select a handful of DOM elements for changes. Classes offer a more specific selector that's much more applicable to the real world. To select all elements of a certain class name, simply pass the class name with a dot in front as a string to the jQuery object. For instance, if you want to select all elements of class green, you could call the jQuery object and pass it a string of a dot followed by green. This string that you're passing in looks a lot like a CSS selector, and that's because it is. In fact, any valid CSS selector is also valid in jQuery. For this quiz, you'll be working with the sample page again. I want you to select all elements of the class article item and save them to variable articles. Once again, you can check your work by console.logging the resulting jQuery collection.
For this quiz, a jQuery class selector, use a jQuery class selector to grab all of the elements of class article item. Okay, so we're just going to do that and that. And then we're just going to do console.log article items. Expected the collection to have a length of 4 had 0 instead. Expected class of type article. Remember, class selector starts with a dot. Okay, so it's actually article item.
This wasn't too bad. I simply started with the jQuery object and passed it the string of .article item. Let's go ahead and console.log it to see if it worked. I'll hit test run. Okay, the page appeared down here. I'll open up the console, and there we go. We can see a list of article items. Very cool. Once again, there are some errors being shown here, and you might see some too, but don't worry, just focus on what the console is producing for your code. Last in our series of the 3 main types of selectors, you can also select elements by ID. Unlike tags or classes, IDs are specific to single elements, so we should expect to see a jQuery collection with only one DOM element returned. Selecting by ID is easy. Simply put a hashtag or # or whatever you want to call it in front of the ID name inside quotes, so you've got a string, and you'll be selecting by ID. For this quiz, set the nav variable equal to the jQuery collection of the DOM element with ID of nav. First things first, we need the jQuery object, so I'll start with the $, and then I'll pass in a string of #nav. I'll go ahead and console.log nav to see if we're getting what we want, and I'll hit test run. Page shows up, and I'll open up DevTools to see that we have in fact selected the nav. With the help of jQuery selectors, you can select specific elements of the DOM. But what if you wanted all the children of this div? How would you find them? Alternatively, what if you selected this div, but you wanted to inspect its parent element, this div? How would you find it? jQuery gives us DOM traversal methods for moving around the DOM tree. I'll start with parent. If I've selected the node with the ID Cameron, I can select my immediate parent by calling .parent. .parent goes up the DOM one level, so at this point I've selected the element with the ID Mark Suzanne. I could use .parents to select my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents. I could also filter for a specific parent by passing in another selector to the parents method. Say, for instance, I just wanted my grandparents, Jerry, Judy. I could pass Jerry, Judy with a £sign into parents, and then only have this node selected. It's important to note that parent will only go up a single level in the tree. If you need to go up more than just one level, you need to use .parents, which will go all the way up to the top of the DOM tree. I could go down the DOM too and select my children using .children. .children creates a jQuery collection of all of my immediate children, meaning that they're one level down in the DOM. But if I wanted my children's children, or any children of Taylor and Grant, if they existed in this example, I would have to use .find. .find goes down the DOM more than one level. Similar to parent and parents, jQuery provides a method that only traverses a single level deep in the tree, which is called .children. If you want to go deeper, there's a separate method called .find, which will go many levels down in the DOM tree. Finally, there's .siblings. .siblings returns a jQuery collection of all of my siblings, meaning that we've got the same parent. In this case, Max and I both have the same parent, so calling .siblings would return Max. And once again, I can pass a selector into siblings if I need to get more specific with my selection. Now, I want you to try out all of these DOM traversal methods with a quiz. This selector returns a jQuery collection of the DOM element of class article list. Using that selector and the DOM traversal methods you just learned, can you grab this h1 tag, which says cool articles, all of the children of article list, and its two parent divs, here and here.
Okay. For this quiz, use article list and DOM navigation methods to collect article list siblings. h1, var h1, children, var kids, and then parents, divs and var parents. You must use article list to navigate to the elements. Start with these variables. Okay, the article list, so h1 equals, let's take a look here. H1 is, so if I'm article list, so on this guy. Okay, so if I wanted to select H1, your code goes here. So if I wanted to select H1, so it's article list parent. Oh. That goes right here. Kids. So if I'm this guy, so header ph3 image li ui li, this guy, this is all the kids article item. Okay.
With the help of jQuery selectors, you can select specific elements in the DOM. But what if you wanted all the children of this div? How would you find them? Alternatively, what if you selected this div, but you wanted to inspect its parent element, this div? How would you find it? jQuery gives us DOM traversal methods for moving around the DOM tree. I'll start with parent. If I've selected the node with the ID Cameron, I can select my immediate parent by calling .parent. .parent goes up the DOM one level, so at this point I've selected the element with the ID Mark Suzanne. I could use .parents to select my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents. I could also filter for a specific parent by passing in another selector to the parents method. Say, for instance, I just wanted my grandparents, Jerry, Judy. I could pass Jerry, Judy with a # into parents, and then only have this node selected. It's important to note that parent will only go up a single level in the tree. If you need to go up more than just one level, you need to use .parents, which will go all the way up to the top of the DOM tree. I could go down the DOM too and select my children using .children. .children creates a jQuery collection of all of my immediate children, meaning that they're one level down in the DOM. But if I wanted my children's children, or any children of Taylor and Grant, if they existed in this example, I would have to use .find. .find goes down the DOM more than one level. Similar to parents and parents, jQuery provides a method that only traverses a single level deep in the tree, which is called .children. If you want to go deeper, there's a separate method called .find, which will go many levels down in the DOM tree. Finally, there's .siblings. .siblings returns a jQuery collection of all of my siblings, meaning that we've got the same parent. In this case, Max and I both have the same parent, so calling .siblings would return Max. But once again, I can pass a selector into siblings if I need to get more specific with my selection. Now, I want you to try out all of these DOM traversal methods with a quiz.
Hmm. Yeah, okay, guys. This is obviously what you must use article list to navigate to the elements. So here are all the variables. We define article list to be the selector for that article list. And from there, we say H1 is its sibling. Its kids are article list.children, and the parents are article.parents. So should be it. Let's see. Can't evaluate, make sure you use variables provided. So,
To find the H1 element, I simply use the siblings method and passed in the filter H1.
Yeah, give me 5 minutes.
For the kids, I used find and I passed in a star. I'll come back to this in a second. And then for the parents, I used the .parents method and passed in the string div. Otherwise, I would select all the parents, including the body. To test this, I press test run, saw the page come up, and then open DevTools. I see that I've gotten H1 like I expected. I see the children of article list, and I also see the two divs that we were expecting. Now, why did I pass a star to find? Looking at the documentation for it, we see that the selector isn't optional. You've got to include it. But if we scroll down, we find this message, which says that if we want to select all of the descendant elements or all of the children, we can simply pass in the universal selector, which in this case is a string of a star. See, reading documentation is super important. Okay, enough with these selections. Now I want you to start manipulating the DOM. With the help of jQuery, to find the H1 element, I simply use the siblings method and passed in the filter H1. For the kids, I used find and I passed in a star. I'll come back to this in a second. To find the h1 element, I simply use the siblings method and passed in the filter h1. The kids, I use this selector returns a jQuery collection of the To find the h1 element, I simply use the siblings method and passed in the filter h1. For the kids, I used find and I passed in a star. I'll come back to this in a second. And then for the parents, th- to find the h1 element, I simply use the siblings method and passed in the filter h1. For the kids, I used find and I passed in a star. I'll come back to this in a second. And then for the parents, I used the .parents method and passed in the string div. Otherwise, I would select all the parents.
Dad,
Yeah.
the food's ready.
Okay, I'm coming.
Daddy's coming. Why am I late this morning?
This selector returns a jQuery collection of the DOM element of class article list. Using that selector and the DOM traversal methods you just learned, can you grab this h1 tag, which says pool articles, all of the children of article list, and its two parent divs here and here. Welcome to the course on jQuery. I'm excited. This selector returns a jQuery collection of the DOM element of class article list. Using that selector and the DOM traversal methods you just learned, to find the h1 element, I simply use the siblings method and passed in the filter h1. For the kids, I used find and I passed in a star. I'll come back to this in a second. And then for the parents, I used the .parents method and passed in the string. This selector returns a jQuery collection of the DOM element of class article list. Using that selector and the DOM traversal methods you just learned, can you grab this h1 tag returns a jQuery articles of the DOM element of class article list, and its two selector and the DOM traversal methods you just learned. Can you grab this h1 tag, which to find the h1 element, I simply use the siblings method and passed in the filter h1.
Dad, it's time to eat and the food is getting cold.
Brandon, I need to finish this up, okay? Go ahead and eat, guys.
Huh?
Go ahead and eat.
I said go ahead and
Define the H1 element. At this point in the class, you've gotten a good idea of how jQuery works. You've used the three main types of selectors, and you've started navigating around the DOM with traversal methods. That's awesome. But now it's time to start making changes to the DOM, which is the whole purpose of jQuery. To that end, you'll be using the jQuery API documentation in the next lesson. And rather than going through each method one by one, I'll be walking you through a series of challenges where you'll be tasked to take apart the jQuery documentation to figure out how to make changes to a sample page. To get started, I want to walk you through the general format of the jQuery API documentation. For this lesson, you'll be focusing on prep.
Wow, guys! Wow, start off, guys! How's the noodles, guys?
Where'd it go? Like this? Go.
Over here, when we went here. When we went here, I was like, oh, this is my foot. This ground is over now. And we decided to go to the other one. We're like, oh, there's people here. So then, turns out, I guess they turned it off.
Mommy. 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 Mommy, what? No, mommy. At our wall, there's a guy, and the back, the guy, the dog, and he put a lot of bubbles. I mean, and then found.
Oh my God. Was there really a guy there?
Brendan, give Daddy the iPad. I don't want to access the iPad. Where's Excalibur? Daniel, put the iPad on Daddy's desk. Stop stepping on the iPad. It's my favorite. How are you? Where was the last time I was playing with Excalibur? This is my last time using my baby.
3, 2, 1. Let it rip. You guys are responsible for your video.
Wait a sec. Oh, I remember. Because we went to church.
Okay, can I?
Oh, I know it. Where's my whipper?
Hey, what are these guys? What are these on the floor?
What?
I need actually these are your stuff.
What?
Guys, do give mommy a good night.
Where's
Where's my Beyblade, guys? Do I have a Beyblade? Go to sleep.